Today, of course, is Holocaust Memorial Day, a day to pause and reflect on one of the darkest chapters in human history, the systematic state-sanctioned murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime. It's been over 8 decades since the liberation of Auschwitz, but the tragedy of the Holocaust still echoes in our world, reverberating through time, reminding us of the depths to which humanity can sink when hatred is allowed to run unchecked. And yet, here we stand in 2025, and the voices of those who suffered, the survivors who lived through the horror, are growing fewer. And in their absence, we've witnessed something truly disturbing: the rise of ignorance, of distortion, and even denial. There was a survey recently revealed, get this, nearly 1 in 5 young Canadians, 1 in 5, believe the Holocaust has been exaggerated. Exaggerated. To the survivors who still carry with them the scars, both physical and emotional, of what they endured, how do they feel about this? How do they feel about 1 in 5 young Canadians saying the Holocaust was exaggerated? To the families of those who were marched into gas chambers or shot into mass graves whose bodies were turned into ash? Exaggerated? To them, the notion of exaggeration is not just offensive, it's a profound injustice. But it's not just about ignorance. It's about something far darker. It's about a cultural amnesia that has been cultivated by a system that, instead of ensuring the lessons of the past are passed down, has allowed the seeds of hatred and denial to take root. This isn't merely a failure of education. It's a system, or a symptom rather, a symptom of a broader, more insidious issue. In Canada today, we're witnessing the growth of anti-Semitism in new, dangerous forms. The same radical ideologies that have infiltrated global discourse are now fueling this hatred. Ideologies that are propped up by misinformation, by pro-Hamas propaganda, and by an alarming degree of tolerance for hatred disguised as social justice. Look around you. This is not a theoretical discussion. Anti-Semitism is alive and well on Canadian streets. In the wake of the October 7th Hamas attack, where 1,200 Israelis were butchered in an act of unspeakable brutality, Jewish Canadians have been subjected to harassment, intimidation, and violence. Jewish-owned businesses have been vandalized in Toronto. Synagogues have been desecrated. Jewish students simply trying to go about their lives have been threatened and bullied on university campuses. And what has been the response of our leaders? Weak statements, empty gestures, and the tacit endorsement of radical voices that seek to erase Israel from the map. We've seen mobs waving Palestinian flags, chanting genocidal slogans, calling for the destruction of Jews, and yet those voices are allowed to be heard. They're allowed to spread their venom without consequence. Let me again repeat, Hamas is not a resistance movement. Hamas is a terrorist organization, and their mission is simple and clear: the complete destruction of the Jewish people. They're not engaged in a struggle for peace or justice. They're following in the footsteps of the Nazis, pushing for the annihilation of an entire people. It's right there in their charter, in black and white. When people tell you who they are, believe them. And yet here in Canada, we've seen their supporters march freely through our streets, spreading their hate-filled messages and facing little to no pushback. Why? Because the very leaders we've elected to protect us have failed to act. Because they've turned a blind eye to the swelling tide of hatred. The Canadian government, Justin Trudeau and his Liberal allies, with their relentless virtue signaling and pandering to radical groups, have created this environment where hatred against Jews can thrive. Instead of standing up for the Jewish community, those who've contributed immeasurably to Canada's success, they've chosen to walk the path of moral equivalency, attempting to balance the actions of Hamas with Israel's right to defend itself. We've heard the words, calls for restraint, and both sides. How can we possibly justify this false equivalency? Israel, the only democracy in the region, defending its citizens from terrorists who've shown no respect for life, no desire for peace. To equate this defense with the savagery of Hamas is not just morally bankrupt, it's an affront to the memory of the Holocaust. And this false narrative, this distortion of reality, has found fertile ground among the younger generation. It's no wonder 18% of young Canadians believe the Holocaust has been exaggerated, when they're being fed a steady diet of misinformation, when they're subjected to a curriculum that ignores the dangers of unchecked hatred, when they're exposed to media outlets that twist the truth about Israel. The problem isn't just ignorance, it's a willful ignorance, a deliberate erasure of history, and a normalization of hate that's becoming dangerously accepted in our public discourse. Take, for instance, the recent incident in Ireland, where President Michael Higgins used a Holocaust memorial event to attack Israel, spouting leftist rhetoric about Gaza, completely disregarding the solemnity of the occasion. And when a pregnant Jewish woman and the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor dared to turn their backs in protest, they were physically removed. This is where we're heading. Toward a world where dissent is silenced, where those who speak out against anti-Semitism are punished, and where the memory of the Holocaust is used as a pawn in the pursuit of political agendas. But this isn't just an issue confined to Europe. Canada is teetering on the edge of the same abyss. We're witnessing the rise of radicals who, under the banner of social justice, are spreading hatred. They're infiltrating our institutions, and our leaders are too afraid to stand up to them. In fact, some of them are enabling them. It's not just about one isolated incident. It's about a broader cultural shift and a failure to protect those who need our protection the most. Pro-Hamas rallies and organizations must be shut down. Any group that provides support for terrorists should be facing the full force of the law. We can't allow hatred to roam free in our streets. We can't allow Jewish Canadians to live in fear. And we need to overhaul our education system. Holocaust education must be more than just a checkbox. It must be mandatory, comprehensive, and taught with the gravity that it deserves. Students must learn the history of the Holocaust in full, and they must understand the ideologies that led to it. They must be able to recognize the warning signs of anti-Semitism before it's too late. And we have to reclaim the narrative. Social media platforms have become breeding grounds for lies and propaganda and hate speech, and it's time we hold these platforms more accountable. Conservatives, pro-Israel advocates, and anyone who values truth has to take the lead in countering disinformation. We need to ensure that the real story is being told, that the truth of history is preserved and amplified. And hate crimes against Jews are on the rise. They must be treated with the seriousness that they deserve. If someone is targeting Jewish Canadians, they must face justice. No more excuses, no more looking the other way. And finally, we have to stand with our Jewish brothers and sisters. We can't afford to be silent. The Jewish community has been an integral part of Canada's success and growth. They've contributed in ways that have enriched us all. They deserve to live in peace, free from fear and harassment. It's time we all stand up for them. History is not just something that happened a long time ago. It's alive, it's present, it's here. The lessons of the Holocaust cannot be forgotten. We can't let the horrors of the past fade into oblivion. We have to remember. We have to act. Because if we don't, the darkness of history will creep back into our lives. And next time, it may be too late. Hey, this is Richard Syrett. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe.